an entire subway line is about to take to the skies. The challenge? To thread a fleet of trains into a tunnel sealed at both ends. The deadline, 24 hours away.
Quite stressful as I'm looking at it.
In Canada, a salvage team battles to raise a plane that's been at the bottom of a lake for 75 years. They are miles away from civilization, so when things go wrong, they're on their own.
We got fouled. It happens.
Both moves are vulnerable to bad weather.
There's a lot more wind up there than down here.
Two massive machines.
Okay, up another 10, going up.
Two teams with a mission to move them. Two tough endeavors that will test the nerves of the people who dare to risk huge moves. London, one of the most frenetic cities in the world. Every day, over 3 million people descend into the oldest, longest, and one of the most overstretched subway systems on Earth, the Underground. Like a sprawling spider's web, 272 miles of track crisscrosses the capital. 13 lines link almost everywhere in London through a multi-layered labyrinth of tunnels. One of the busiest and shortest lines begins at Bank, deep in the financial heart of the capital. The Waterloo and City line runs under the Thames to the international transport hub of Waterloo Station. 40,000 people a day made this short 1.5-mile journey until April 2006, when engineers decided it was time to shut the line for an overhaul. Originally built in the 1890s, the line has been showing its age, so the old track has been replaced with new. After 5 months, the engineers are almost ready to reopen. There's just one thing missing: the trains. All the cars are being refurbished 190 miles to the north in the rail town of Doncaster. There is just time for some last-minute checks before this gleaming flotilla of Waterloo and City trains sets off for London. Getting them back down the tunnel is the responsibility of Alf Arnold.
I've got these 20 carriages here, and that comprises the whole fleet of the Waterloo and City line, worth about £1 million each. And the problem we've got is that we've got to get them back to London safely, without any marks or anything else, to get them working for the Waterloo and City line return to service.
The most obvious way back to London is to use the overground railroad that passes right by the yard. The cars could be back in the city in a few hours. But this idea is flawed. There are only a few places where trains can cross from the overground rail network onto the underground. This allows direct access onto every line except the Waterloo and City line. How about transferring trains between lines? 6 lines converge at Bank Station. It would seem like the obvious transfer point. But going underground reveals why this will not work. All the lines are at different depths, with no linking tunnels between them. It is physically impossible to transfer trains onto the Waterloo and City line at Bank. What about the other end of the line at Waterloo Station? It's a similar problem. None of the other lines connect. The Waterloo and City line is completely cut off from both the overground and underground networks, so the movers must use a different strategy.
There is only actually one way to get anything larger than a rucksack into the Waterloo and City line depot, and that's through this hole here. If you look over the side of the hole, you'll see it's actually 15 metres into the depot, and we've got to land the trains on the rails, which are only 7 centimetres wide. There's only one piece of machinery we could use in a situation like this, and that's a crane.
But dangling a train into such a narrow opening will be like threading a needle at arm's length. The margin of error is tiny. If they scrape or damage any cars, they will have to go back to Doncaster for repair and delay the reopening of the line. John must come up with a precise plan which sites the crane as close as possible to the entrance shaft without causing damage to the surroundings. The obvious place is the road right next to the hole, but putting the crane here might lose John a few friends. This road is actually a bridge over the Waterloo and City Line train depot, and it's only strong enough to carry a few cars, not hundreds of tons of crane. So if the driver placed the crane here, he would soon find himself crashing through into the depot below. Not a good start to the day. So John Chenery must find an alternative location that can support hundreds of tons.
The nearest area that's strong enough to sit the crane on is down by the zebra crossing in front of us.
The only snag is that this is 36 meters from the hole, a long way away to dangle a 23-ton train. They will need a crane with a long reach, and a big crane means a big weight. But this move is happening right in the middle of London. With so many shops and houses in the area, there are some hidden hazards that John must avoid.
The whole area is crisscrossed by water mains, gas pipes, electricity cables, sewers. I need to be extremely precise as to the exact position that I set the crane up.
Far away from urban bustle, deep in the Canadian hinterland, lies an isolated lake. Charon Lake is 220 miles northeast of Winnipeg and 50 miles from the nearest settlement. It is an unlikely setting for a nail-biting move, yet this remote lake holds a long-lost secret. On December the 10th, 1931, a lone Fokker Standard Universal transport plane was battling against a thick snowstorm. Spotting a frozen lake from his open cockpit, the pilot decided to risk landing. The plane was ferrying heavy equipment to a gold rush, so when it taxied to a halt, it broke through a thin area of ice. The crew escaped, but rescuing the plane in the middle of winter was impossible. With the coming of spring, the ice broke and the plane disappeared into the lake. "75 years on, Pat Madden, a retired Mountie, has come to this remote part of Canada to try to recover this historic aircraft.
You know, it's just an amazing saga of Canadian exploration and of aviation history. There were only 44 of them made, and they pretty much opened up a good part of the north for exploration and for mapping and everything. They were a real hardy bush plane, and this is the last one.
Pat has assembled a team of friends and keen amateurs to help him realize his dream, including his wife, Annette Spaulding, who shares his obsession for this aircraft. They've been coming every summer for 7 years in a row. They even spent their honeymoon searching for the Fokker.
We have everything planned. We have all the equipment to do it. All we need is Mother Nature on our side, and that's what we're really hoping for. We are not leaving this lake without that plane.
It's been an arduous task. This lake is huge, with 35 million square meters of muddy bottom to explore. Using sonar, they scoured almost the entire lake. Finally, in the summer of 2005, they had a lucky break.
And I'll stop the record right here. And there's our target. In the process of running some lines back and forth, we were able to get much better pictures of the target. And here we have one screen capture, which it certainly looks like spars of the wing the tail structure. You can actually see the steel lattice of the fuselage.
Intrigued by its eerie aura on the sonar, they now call the plane the ghost of Charon Lake. The team has just 1 week to complete the mission before the volunteers fly back to their day jobs. If they're successful, a Canadian Air Force chopper will fly in to take the aircraft to an air museum in Winnipeg for restoration. Charon Lake is very remote. There are no roads for miles. The only way in is by float plane, and this makes diving operations risky. There's no medical help and only air evacuation, so they've taken the decision that it's too dangerous to dive. They will carry out the underwater salvage by remote control. They must rely on a pair of aquatic robots known as remotely operated vehicles, or ROVs.
Can we do it? Okay, let's lateral. 2 meters.
There are several ways they could raise the plane. The first is to use the ROVs to find the best places to cut the fragile airframe into sections and then winch them to the surface. But to make restoration easier, Pat would prefer to keep the airframe in one piece. A second option is to attach inflatable lifting bags and float the airframe to the surface. But as it's difficult to control the rate the lift bags rise towards the surface, there is a high risk that the plane will fall apart. Instead, they decide to make use of an original feature of the plane. There are 4 lift points just above the wing, designed for lifting the aircraft when swapping summer floats for winter skis. By attaching a line to each of these, the team hope to winch the plane safely to the surface. But they've based this rescue plan on blurry sonar images. They don't know the true state of the wings, the position of the engine, or the condition of the 4 lift points. The only way to check is to carry out a full reconnaissance of the plane's remains using cameras on their ROVs.
Well, we're seeing part of the frame, and there's some of the original fabric that's still on the plane, which is quite interesting. And we're just looking now to find the engine mounts to see if the engine is actually still attached to the airframe.
This is the engine mount here, I think. That's looking pretty good as a potential engine.
Yeah, that's the engine, but it's down.
Yeah.
It's off.
Yeah. Thank God we found it, though. Holy shit.
Thousands of miles away, night draws in over London. John Chenery braces himself for the arrival of the giant crane that will lower the cars into the Waterloo and City Line tunnel.
The crane is going to block the road, and I've got to get these wagons out before the crane blocks the road and they'll be trapped in.
Block the road off, stop the traffic coming down so the crane can come in and do his job.
So we come to the...
In less than 2 hours, John must throw a cordon around this busy street and transform it into a safe worksite. Not what everyone wants on a Friday night.
I've got to block the area where outside the bar.
Get us to the pub!